1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, you're listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. We are a general interest independent bookstore located in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. This year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we've had to close our store and cancel in-person events. But Skylight is your neighborhood bookstore, and we are finding ways to create community even while we're far apart. In the coming weeks, we'll be putting out lots of new audio content to help you discover new books, connect with authors, and check in with your favorite booksellers. To learn more about how you can help keep Skylight alive, please visit our website at skylightbooks.com or check out our social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening and enjoy.
I got to read these books back in the winter. They were sent to me as galleys and agreed to do this event, put it on the calendar. I reread both the books at the beginning of April, in the middle of quarantine, feeling and start like I hadn't been able to read. I hadn't been able to focus, especially a novel. And reading these two back to back, I was the most escapist, thrilling, still is the most thrilling thing that I've done in months. And I've been recommending your books to everyone. So I want to start, just in case there are people joining us today who haven't read your books, maybe we'll start with Emily, and you can tell us a little bit what your book is about, and then Rufie as well.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I'm still figuring out how to best look at the screen because it's like too overwhelming to look at the one with everyone, and so I want to just have it be like a whoa, oh my god. I'm gonna act like we're sitting next to each other and just make imaginary eye contact with you, Steph.
Yes.
So Perfect Tunes is about a mother and a daughter, and the mother's name is Laura and the daughter's name is Marie. As the story begins, Laura has not yet become a mother. She's 22. She's just moved to New York City to make it as a singer-songwriter, but her life gets kind of derailed when she meets and falls in love with this guy, Dylan, who is much more famous and successful, sort of like quasi rock star. And in very, very short order, they fall in love, or at least she falls in love with him. It's like a minor spoiler, but it says it in the flap copy, so I feel like it's okay to talk about it. He dies. She finds out she's pregnant and decides to have a baby because she's like, oh, I'm so in love with this person who died. Great idea to have a baby, even though I'm 22 and have no money and have no support system. So she. So the rest of the book is sort of like the consequences of that decision. And by the end, Marie is a point of view character, and we see what her relationship with her mother is like from her perspective. And she's 14 and hates her mom. I think that's pretty much it. It starts in 2001. And it ends in 2015.
So is it, I go now?
Yes, you can go.
Okay.
Yes, I'll be really aggressive. Rufie, you may speak now.
All right, thank you. So my novel, The Knockout Queen, is my third book, and it's about a friendship between two kind of unlikely friends. Bunny is a volleyball star in high school. By the end of high school, she's 6'3", 200 pounds. And her dad is a really prominent real estate agent in town. And then her next door neighbor, Michael, moved to town because his mom got sent to prison and works at Rite Aid and has a secret Grindr account. And on the surface, you wouldn't think that they have very much in common, but in fact, they kind of have everything in common. And so it's about their friendship, but it's mainly about Bunny winds up doing something kind of on impulse that then they have to sort out all the consequences for and kind of understand how to hold each other accountable. So it's it's very much it's a book about the body and about wanting things that you wish you didn't want, and loving people that you wish you didn't love, and doing things you didn't mean to do. And just, you know, the extent to which we're animals, like flying by the seat of our pants, basically.
Great descriptions, you guys. Very accurate. I would love to hear from both of you about the origins of these novels. I think that fiction often springs the first image, the first kind of like what Joan Didion calls the images that shimmer around the edges. Kind of, they can come out of nowhere. They can be sparked by a conversation, someone you see on the street, a newspaper story. And I'm wondering, the first part is, can you remember, because I'm sure I couldn't remember, but can you remember what that first impulse was? And then when did you know you had a book? Like, at what point, as you started to become intrigued by each of these stories, did you know that there was actually something there?
Rufie, why don't you go first? Because I went first last time.
Well, I had written a novel 10 years ago called Bunny Lanford that was really just interconnected short stories in which she was a peripheral character. So it's sort of this negative space portrait, and none of the plot of the two books is the same, but she was really big and strong and was a boxer. And so she's just been in the back of my mind for a decade, you know. But I know that the very first seed of thinking about her was, I was at a party in Brooklyn at someone's apartment. I don't even know who it was anymore. And there was a girl boxer there who was really, maybe she was just really messed up on drugs, or she had like really intense traumatic brain injury, but she had this kind of like little guy boyfriend who was like her tender, her like kind of keeper. And I found just being around her, I mean, I don't even think I had a full conversation with her, but I found the existence of her to be like a very compelling and troubling, and I kind of couldn't let go of it. And so then when it became a book this time was when that idea kind of merged with, we were trying to move and we were trying to buy a house, and every single house in this town we were trying to move to seemed like it was represented by the same realtor. And I just thought, what would it be like to be that guy's daughter? And so then I sort of imagined like, well, what if Bunny came from that family? And that was her background. And that's sort of where the book started.
That's so interesting to know.
I mean, it's haunting. Having read The Knockout Queen, thinking that there was when you were talking about that woman that you met at the party, thinking that there's like a real life antecedent to Bunny, it makes my chest tense. But yeah, we have follow-up questions, but let's hear from Emily. We can just kind of bounce back and forth.
So I have always been really interested in knowing what my mother was like before she became my mother. And there's some sort of primary texts that I can refer to, like old pictures of her. And I've like seen a diary that she kept when she was like in her late teens and early 20s. I wish I talked to my grandparents about it more before they died. But she's not a reliable source of intel on what that person was like. She's like let little bits and pieces escape over the years, but like it's very, very hard to get her to talk about what her life was like when she was a young person, even though I think her life was really interesting. And I've never written about it directly because that would really, really, really piss her off. So I had to find a way to write about my mother where I wasn't just writing about my mother. So I had to create this character who's nothing like her, but then sort of graft the relationship onto her. So I really started with the teenage girl stuff. because I know what it's like to be a teenage daughter of a mother and like be fighting with her all the time. But I don't actually know what it's like to be the mother of a teenage girl, and I don't know what it's like to be someone who has their sort of like dreams crushed by having a baby, except for in the like very, very low key sense that like we all do. Those of us have babies. So yeah, that was I guess the germ of the story. And I did a whole first draft that I've talked about a lot, which I still can't really believe existed, where there's the teenage girl character. She wanted to know what her mother was like before she was born, and so she found a way to travel back in time, literally, via ayahuasca trip. And I threw that whole draft away because it turned out to be like very bad, and I'm not qualified to write, sci-fi or like whatever genre it is where it's just the world, but there's one magic detail. And I don't like those books generally. So, the books where it's like, I feel like a bitch for like naming one, but the first one that popped into my head was The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake, where it's like, it's just the world, but this girl can like bake cakes that make people cry. And it was like a huge bestseller. I don't know. There was sort of a fad of books like that for a while. Anyway, I did not write one. I'm not qualified to write one. And I threw it all away and then came up with like something else, which is this.
And just when did you know with the, like, when did you, so it starts with Marie, the germ of the story started with Marie because it's what you knew. And I'm wondering when you knew it really could be a book. It has a pretty unique structure insofar as you are jumping through time and you've focused each section on different, I guess, motherhood episodes, right? There's like conception, and there's a lot of maternal trauma that we can talk about. All the first time the baby is sick and you are sick. And, but like, when did you, I guess I'm wondering like how long we all write in the dark with like a good idea. And then at a certain point it switches into, oh wait, this is a book. This will hold its shape.
I think I finally of the non-time travel draft had like 2 scenes that I was really sure of, and then I felt confident that I could arrange everything else around them. And even if some of the other stuff was like weaker, those scenes were good enough to like justify the existence of the rest of the book. I have this really strong memory of my friend Jamie Attenberg asked me to read work in progress at an event that she was doing for the paperback launch of like one of her books. I don't even remember which one, because she is one of those really prolific authors who like writes a super great book every 2 years. And I think it was St. Maisie, because that would make sense with like the timeline of the stuff happening. And I read a version of the scene where Laura, the main character, has sex with Dylan for the first time. And I remember, and just like, I mean, obviously if you read a sex scene out loud, people are going to be very like receptive to that usually, because you're like doing something sort of brave. But I felt like I wasn't sure where I was going with it. And I knew it wasn't like, didn't have enough heft on its own to just be a short story. Because it would be like a 2-page short story about having sex with someone who has a perfect dick. But the response to, not that that's not a valid, I don't know. The response to that was like, okay, like I should keep going with this and everything else that's around it. And then the other scene that was the first Marie scene where she throws the phone at her mom, because I also threw a phone at one point at my mom, which is like the worst thing I've ever done in my life.
Well,
Still.
First of all, you're lucky.
That's the worst thing. Oh God.
Yeah, you're lucky. That's the worst thing that you've ever done. But when that section opens,
I threw it really hard. Anyway.
I mean, I'm pregnant with a girl right now, and when that scene opened, I was like, fuck. It's the way it is. It's so real. Yeah. And it sounds like you've been a saint since then. So
Mom would probably argue that writing in my first book about her in the completely callous way that I did might be worse than throwing the phone.
Oh, right.
That's maybe a debate that my mom can have and I can have later on like texts.
I really hope that Emily's mom is watching right now.
She might not be. She's seen, like, she's already been to like 4 of these, so I feel like that's as many as anyone could really be and just like expected to. Anyway, sorry. I feel like let's talk about Rufie's book for a little bit.
No, and I have a similar question for Rufie, which is, so you start with Bunny, you tie her to a place, a very specific place, a very specific side of Southern California that I am familiar with and rarely see in fiction. But I feel like the spine of the book is this friendship. And so when did Michael come in? And when did you know, again, the shape of this book, that there was something there beyond Bunny?
Well, so I was trying to write the book from Bunny's point of view, or in third person, like close with her. And it just wasn't working because she didn't have enough perspective to experience what was happening as anything other than like pain, kind of. It was because what's happening is so traumatic for her. And so she can't give you the nuance. And she also is frustrated by herself and hates herself a lot. And so she's not really able to render everything that's charming and wonderful about her. So I kind of knew that I needed a focalizer character. You know, like there's lots of books that do this, like, you know, The Great Gatsby or Sophie's Choice, where you have this larger than life character being talked about by someone who's like more part of our terrestrial world. And so I knew I needed such a person. But when I got the idea for Michael, it was really like all in a flash, and he kind of came with that backstory and that voice, and it was really like propulsive, and the book sort of just took off and started writing itself. Whereas it had been in like a daily struggle for over a year at that point. And so that draft was really fun and exciting to write because Michael is just so bad. He's so mean and so funny. And so it's like someone giving you permission to be like your meanest, funniest self.
And he's also so much smarter than all the adults present. I see what you're saying now, how for Bunny, there's a sense, without giving anything away, of tragedy. And you can't really be the voice of your own tragedy because you're just suffering and circling the drain. And but in the books that you're talking about, the friend is usually like, I think there would have been a more conventional novel, which is like the female friendship, where it's someone who looks up to Bunny, someone who idolizes her. But you chose to write from a really, what I think is a complicated point of view, which is a gay teenage boy who is living in a very class conscious beach town. He's at the bottom end of that strata, and his story separate from Bunny is wild. And so you knew that you were ready to take on his desires and all of like his struggle. He just came to you in a flash. Were you interested in writing about a gay teenage boy? Like, did you know you had that in you?
So when I first started writing Michael, I knew the first part that was there for me was the domestic violence component of his family background. And part of it was because so much of the book is a meditation on violence, that I knew that all the characters needed to have violence like deeply sewn into them. And so that's where I started. But Michael just sort of, so when I say he came to me in a flash, I'm not one of those people who believes that it's coming from some other astral realm, or it's like, some magic idea ghost that's then telling the story and coming up with its own ideas. For me, when that happens, it's because it's like a deeply repressed aspect of self. And so sure enough, he sort of just started bringing up pieces of my own biography. So I was very confused about my own sexuality and would meet women to have sex with online, but still kind of be like, pretend I was straight to everybody. And so when it's really more of like in a lot of ways, Michael's the most autobiographical character that I've ever written, because I generally dislike writing autobiographical things. But so it's a little bit more of just like a gender switch than a complete like objective interest in the gay male experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. That's exactly what I was wondering. Because you write it so honestly and authentically. And I would have guessed that he came first. It makes Bunny is like, she's so breathtaking and she takes up all the space on the page, but I would have guessed that he came first because he felt so close to your heart. And so again, I'm going to be careful about spoilers, but there, in each book, Emily already talked about hers a little bit, but there's a childhood trauma, and I feel like your books are about the kind of blast radius of that trauma. And I'm wondering if you guys were, because these aren't coming of ages, right? Like a coming of age sort of like ends with a shift, but doesn't really investigate the damage further down the line. I'm wondering what you guys think about that assessment that I made, and also if you were conscious of that while you were working, that you were writing beyond the sort of coming of age genre. I mean, Emily, let's start with you. In your case, your book does kind of a 180 when Dylan dies. You think that it's going to be about one thing, which is like trying to fuck the guy with the perfect dick who's a absolute living nightmare. And the book entirely changes course and you're into a book about motherhood. So were you aware that you were kind of skewing away from the coming of age genre?
I guess, I wasn't really thinking consciously in terms of genres or even what the whole book would be like when I was done with it. I've only ever outlined in retrospect, which is probably not the best way to go about it. But to me, it seemed more like the sort of like big ideas that were animating the book were about like the good and bad aspects of fame, and sort of what you do if you are a talented person and you kind of, in a sense, consciously or subconsciously have a choice about whether you are going to do everything that it takes to pursue like the highest level of public recognition of your art that you possibly can. And like we've all had to deal with that, even on some tiny scale. I feel like everyone who has any sort of public way of being in the world has probably thought about like, okay, like where is the line for me? And whether she's aware of it or not, what Laura is doing by choosing to step away from the spotlight, even though it probably doesn't feel 100% like a conscious choice for her, is like protecting herself in a way from some of the negative aspects of, she's sort of seen what fame can do, and maybe she's choosing not to do it. But it's also very like conflicted and ambiguous, because she's never like purely happy for her good friend who steps into her sort of role and like goes on to like tour with this band. It's not as straightforward as that she feels jealous, but it is like it's so clearly like a path not taken. And toward the end of the book, it's possible that she's like ready now for what in her mid-20s she like definitely would not have been ready for. I mean, she wasn't ready for motherhood either, but like she really wasn't ready to stand in front of an audience and like be herself.
I wonder, does Laura know? I think because she's in the kind of throes of motherhood, which doesn't allow a lot of bandwidth for you to think about or do anything else. But the way that you wrote her, it felt like she underwent she compromised so much. And it wasn't just this career, but it was this sort of like lust for life, lust for men, and lust, this sense of possibility that she sacrificed her youth, she in her 20s. And yet that's not her story. She's not sitting there with a 14-year-old daughter meditating on everything that she lost. She kind of is just like the day-to-day keeps her so busy, and it's one foot in front of the other. But you seem like you were really aware of the compromise that she made.
I mean, that part of the book is definitely very drawn from my, just like what my like day-to-day headspace has been like for the past 5 years or so. Not that it hasn't also been, awesome to have 2 kids. I don't want to scare you too much. Yeah, I do feel like my husband and I, like, we're both writers, which is a really poor choice in every respect. We were sort of like, we got a little overconfident, I think. Like, we were like, oh, we have 1 child, we're capable of doing that. Like, why not 2? How much worse could it be, really? A lot of Laura's inner monologue, like meditations on like how when she like sees the flowers in the planter outside someone's beautiful Park Slope brownstone, she's sort of like admiring the flowers and thinking like someone has to water those, like someone had to like pick those up from like the garden supply store and like plant them in that planter. Oh, forget about it. Like that's her headspace, and it's really inimical to any kind of artistic pursuit. Like when you get to the point where you are exhausted by the existence of someone else's flowers. That's more like that's where I'm coming to you from today.
I mean, I can't wait to have a second child. Okay. So Rufie, in your case,
great.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Rufie, in your case, the big climactic, traumatic, not air quotes, it is traumatic, I'm taking those away, moment of the book comes about halfway through. And then again, that's something that I think in a more conventional novel would happen towards the end, and there would be more buildup to it. But what you seem to be really interested in is the repercussions, how it alters the course of these 2 children. They are children's lives. And I'm wondering if you ever moved around, right, that big incident, and also when you knew that it was important to get to later in life for them, that you show that.
It definitely was not like a static vision from the beginning that it was going to be shaped in this way. I mean, I think that I've always been, I think one of the reasons I became a novelist is because I actually did not understand stories very well. And so found them like intriguing and mystifying. And I was like, well, what is the difference between a story and a series of events? And how do you tell that things cause each other, and like, what does that mean? And what is the beginning and what is the end? And what does that mean? And so since none of that stuff is obvious to me, plot has always been a real challenge. And I've always tended to be much more, I think because I come at things from a very character oriented place, I'm always very interested in what events in someone's life made them into the person that they are later. So in this book, I was really purposefully trying to understand how someone makes a choice that changes their life, and what is the buildup to that, and what are all the dominoes that have to be in place to just take someone and push them over into a different life than the one they would have had. And so I was really thinking that I was only going to write kind of up to and then the immediate fallout from that climactic event. And then I realized that it wasn't over. And maybe that's like, for me, the end is always about 30 years after the climax of the book. And so I kept kind of having to make them older in order to get at more of their future. And then finally, like, was able to find the end of the book. And I think in a certain sense, I should have known from the beginning, because I had imagined Bunny Lampert all the way, through her 30s and 40s. And so of course I would kind of want to go there. But
that leads me into my next question for both of you, which is your endings are just like punches to the stomach. Oh, knockout queen, that's clever. Punch. See? And I guess I was wondering if you wrote to it linearly, or if those are things that had to be readjusted later. I mean, these are both such emotional novels. And again, I'm talking about clear-cut trauma that happens in Emily's case early in the book and in Rufie's case in the middle of the book. But the endings themselves are more powerful in a way. And I guess I was wondering, and you pretty much answered it, Rufie, but like, when you knew the book was done, when it was just so sad that you were like, this has to be the end.
Well, I think that's another thing that interests me, is like, well, what do you need to have happen in order for it to be over? Like, right. What is it, the thing that you're trying to accomplish that will mean that it's over? And I couldn't figure it out. And I wrote so many different endings to this book. And finally, I figured out that what had to happen in order for it to be over was that Michael had to tell her she didn't have to be good, and that he would still love her, and she would still exist and be beautiful and be Bunny if she was bad. And that was how he would let himself off the hook too. And so once I wrote that scene and got him to the point of saying that, then I knew that was the close of the cycle that had kind of brought them together.
And Emily, in your case, I think the end of the book was so heartbreaking to me, because once you've introduced the adolescent character, you realize that we just don't control the stories that our children tell about us at all. And you've spent an entire book with Laura and everything that she has sacrificed. And it really doesn't matter at all, insofar as how her teenage daughter sees her. Now, of course, we hope that changes once those teenagers pass into adulthood. But I mean, I guess when did you know you had the end, or you were at the end? What Rufie said is the right question. When did you know it was? What did it take for it to be over?
I wanted to have like a moment where the reader is like allowed to be sad, I guess, just because I feel like I'm always sort of craving that when I read a novel. Like I really, once I get into like the back, like, this part of it, I'm like, can I cry? So ideally one wants to cry. So I just had to have something happen that could, be a little cry for me. The catharsis, exactly. And then I don't know, I had tried to go beyond the sort of some like sort of ambiguous moment where the book ends and be more definitive about it. But it just felt like, I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of books, again, not to talk shit about other books. I'm not a master of books. But a lot of the books that I read feel like there's like a little bit of fan servicey padding at the end. And it's like, you could have just stopped like 2 chapters ago. You don't actually need to do like there. I don't know. I'm not even having a specific book in mind as I'm saying this, but I feel like I've read a few books lately that have the finale, the series finale episode of 6 Feet Under, where you see how every character in it dies, and it's like, okay, like like leave the reader something to imagine. And in my case, I probably erred on the side of perhaps too much to imagine, but I definitely didn't want to like get to the end of everyone's story. Like in some ways, at the end of Perfect Tunes, Laura's story is, I really hope for her, just beginning. Like the one upside of having a baby when you're 22 has got to be that like you're 40 and you're like, okay, what's next?
Absolutely. I mean, there's like that little bit of jealousy where I'm like, oh my God, she has her whole life. She has her youth back. But I do think that you're right. And with like that, some books you read and it's like you see the note from the editor that they need to make the conclusion somehow more satisfying, that they need to really arrive at point B from point A. And I think both of your books, maybe what I was feeling about both of them is that they stopped in a perfect point for you to wonder, to be left in the middle of your own sadness, whatever these books bring up for you, whatever you're mourning, and to wonder what's going to happen to these people still. And I thought that was so masterfully. It was really well done. And I think, I mean, I have a couple more questions and I know we're going to do question and answer, but I assume that other writers show up to these Zoom casts or people that are trying to write. And you guys are a wealth of knowledge because you have both written 3 books. This is your 3rd book. And I'm wondering how the experience of writing this book was specifically, but also how it changes every time. If it does, was this harder or easier? And see, someone was going to ask that. You got writers out there. Like, for those of us who are not on our 3rd book, will you please tell us how this goes? Thank you.
Well, you want to go?
No. You've written a lot more books actually than I have. So.
Well, so as some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess, I had heard that it was statistically your 4th book that was most likely to get published. And so I heard that and I was like, dang, I better start writing books now. You know, before I'd been like, I got to live a little and like save time. And then I was like, no, I got to start practicing. I need to write a bunch of crappy books. And so that's what I did. So The Girls from Corona Del Mar was my 4th novel that I had written. And then there was Dear Fang, and then there was another book that I shelved, and then there was The Knockout Queen. And so writing wise, it feels like I'm finally kind of starting to understand what novels are and how they work and where all the gears and levers are. I just love novels. I love they're so big and baggy and messy, and there's room for you can just shove all sorts of crap in there. And so from that point of view, I feel like the more books you write, the more joyful it is because you are gaining mastery over a form, you know? And so you're like, cool, I was able to do this thing I didn't used to be able to do. But then in terms of publishing, I mean, I think that whole publicity process is a lot easier because it's just less, you know, out of body, like, oh my gosh, this thing that I've always wanted is happening and it's so big, and it feels much more like it's like a real event in the world, and it's like more right-sized. And so I found that a lot easier this time too.
So Girls from Corona Del Mar was your 4th novel, plus you wrote a novel in your spare time about Bunny Lampert and a novel that was shelved. So you've written like a million books.
No, I mean, I think, so the Bunny Lampert novel was one of the ones I wrote before The Girls from Corona Del Mar.
There you go.
So that's
but
how
still.
long. Interestingly, Aunt Dee Dee, who's also a character in The Knockout Queen, is from an even older work, the 2nd novel I ever wrote. And so she just has been kicking around in the old noggin too, I guess.
Do you ever look at those manuscripts?
I haven't in years. I mean, I know the 2nd one I knew was so weird that I never even tried to market it. It's not that I thought it was bad, it's that I thought no one is ever going to buy this or read this, because it was like a split page where the top half of the page was a sci-fi novel being written by a 15-year-old boy, and the bottom half of the page was the very messy divorce that his family was having. And so you could kind of see how his fictional world he was building was related to his experiences in his family life, kind of. But I mean, trying to pitch that in a letter to an agent, I was like, I don't even know how to try. So I did.
I mean, I think you just pitched it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, Knopf, someone will be on the phone with you shortly. And then Emily.
Enough, but definitely Grey Wolf or, maybe Thorpe.
Emily, what about you? And you've switched genres, so to speak, from nonfiction to fiction. But how was this book, writing this book?
Well, it's gotten easier for me to write fiction and harder for me to write memoir and nonfiction. I had sort of thought when I finished this book, I would go back to writing essays, and it's just gotten so much harder for me to self-consciously do the thing that used to be the thing that came very naturally and easily to me. So I'm sort of waiting for it to get easier again. And if it doesn't, I guess I'll be forced to embark on another novel because I have to be writing something for myself.
Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think that it's shifted for you? Is it motherhood? Is it you not being 25 anymore? Like what?
It's definitely all of the above, but it's also, I really, I've done my time in the trenches of the internet wars, and really my first book. I haven't reread it lately, so maybe everyone was right about it. But I think it I don't know. I feel very distant from it now, but it really took a drubbing in a way that when it came out felt like a referendum on my personality and my whole sort of self, rather than the book as a work of
art.
Art, separate from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard to get over. You can be like, those people are wrong, but it gets in there. And it's a little bit of a block when I start to, want to be very honest and forthright and vulnerable on the page. I wrote an essay that I thought might be the lead essay in a new collection recently, and after it was published I was just a total mess and having panic attacks every day for a week, and I was like, maybe I don't want to do this to myself. There are other options, actually. There are other ways of being in the world other than being this person who's just a flayed cadaver for people to
Mm-hmm.
learn from. So just exploring that, thinking about that in therapy. I'm totally still capable though of doing things writing wise that I know are not in my best interest, being a person in the world wise. So who knows? I don't know. Stay tuned. I do really like writing novels, but I already feel distant enough from this one that I'm what are novels? How do they work? I have no idea how I wrote this one, and I feel like I could probably never do it again. So,
I mean, that is 100% how I feel, but it is nice to hear from Rufie that there does come some muscle memory at a certain point. We just have to write 5 more books. And then before we go to your questions, I thought it might be nice to share what you're reading and loving right now, just because I know everyone who has joined us today has bought both of your books and will be reading Rufie's shortly. But just in case people are wondering, what is on your TBR?
Well, I fell in love with Wants by Lynn Strong that's coming out in July. It was so terrifying watching someone be that honest. It was like, that's where the suspense was coming from, because you're like, oh shit, she's gonna just say it. She's gonna just speak the truth. And and it was such a like searing experience, and this absolute dispatch from like young motherhood and money and marriage and all of it. And so I highly recommend that one.
Yeah, I would second that. It also has like a really, really tightly controlled voice. Like the narrator of it is just like really in charge of your experience of the book in a way that I think it reads as like easy because it's very effortless to take in, but I think it's actually very hard to achieve. You guys, I just finished. I got a NetGalley of Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld, because I did one of these with her yesterday. So because I used it as a justification for like getting an early copy of the book, which comes out in May. And like, holy shit, you guys, like everything, like the world is gonna just explode when that book comes out. People are gonna hate it and people are gonna love it. There's not gonna be any in between. And it's not, I think, necessarily gonna correlate to how people feel about Hillary Rodham Clinton, the actual person who's alive, because it's an alternative history. It's the version of Hillary who exists in a universe where she did not end up marrying Bill, but instead just had like a really hot and heavy romance with him when they were in law school in the 70s. It's hard to read. It's like in parts, it's really painful to read, because for a lot of reasons, but also for those of us who are like exactly Chelsea Clinton's age, it's a lot of feeling like you're watching your parents have sex. That might just be me. But also it's like thinking about like all of the different things that could have been true in our country that like aren't true right now is fucking excruciating. Anyway, I just literally couldn't recommend any book more highly. It was so transporting that I stayed up until 1:30 in the morning finishing it, which is like as much of an act of like overt self-harm for me in my current like non-negotiably waking up with the kids at 6 a.m. life as like drinking bleach. Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know where I'm gonna go. Oh, I do know where I'm gonna go next. I'm going to read Rufie's book, which is also like it's like in my phone waiting for me to read it. I haven't actually read it.
It is just unbelievably good. You have such a treat. I know.
Yeah. I've really loved all of Rufie's other books, and I even read an early version of Dear Fame, which was like an honor. So yeah, I'm a Rufie head. Don't worry. Like it's gonna be it's not about Hillary Clinton, but like we take what we can get.
Okay. Is it time for questions?
Yes. So I will moderate the Q&A. There's two ways to ask your question. You can either type it in the chat box and I will read it out loud, or if you would prefer to ask it yourself, you can go over to raise hand. There's a little button at the bottom of the screen, I believe. Am I right about that? And you will pop up and I will be able to unmute you and let you ask your question. And please make sure your question's a question, and please keep it brief. Need some Jeopardy music here. All right, so we have a question here from Madeline Inglis. Oh.
Am I unmuted? Okay, good. Hi. Thank you so much for that conversation. It was so amazing to hear all of you. As Stephanie guessed, I mean, I'm sure there's more writers in here. I'm a writer. And so my question is more around craft. I'm currently on the third draft, and I now feel like everything is coming together and I want to change a lot already. So I'm just curious in terms of process from you all, like how many drafts you wrote, like if each draft you started from scratch, or like if you were like editing heavily as you went. I'm just kind of curious about that.
Well, I'm a write a lot and throw away a lotter. That's sort of, I can't, if I expect what I write to be good, then it's like too constipating. So I have to have complete permission for it to be bad in order to write anything. So what I tend to do is write like a bajillion versions of the first act. And then when I feel like I've nailed the first act and I know who the characters are and I know all the pieces of the story, then I kind of move from there. But even once I finished, I mean, I probably do like at least 4 drafts before I even show it to my agent. And then I'll probably do like 2 drafts with my agent and then multiple versions with my editor. So it's, I think it's normal for it to take a novel, 12 drafts to get into a polished state, or it's normal for me.
All right.
Yeah, same deal, basically. Yeah.
Okay, our next question is from Emily White. I'm unmuting you, Emily.
Hi. I was just wondering if the 3 of you could talk about your process writing. Similar note to what was just asked, except for I'm a graduate student who's graduating in the fall with my master's in creative writing. And so I have a huge deadline and the world is looming. So I was just wondering if you could talk about your process, especially in a time like this. Thank you.
Sure. I just wrote something about how to keep going with your writing, even right now with everything. It was like a newsletter for LitHub, and I think they'll post it on their site eventually, maybe in the next like week or so. But basically, I was like, it's like just a rundown of my like tricks that I do to get myself to write, sort of like in the same way that you like put on your gym clothes and like maybe 1 out of like 5 times it makes you go to the gym or like go outside and run around or whatever. One of them is to like really, I know you don't have this option because you actually have to turn something in, but to like lower the bar for yourself on a day-to-day and not have concrete goals, like, and that because those are just like opportunities to feel like a failure. Like the thing about like, I have to do 1,000 words, like I have to write for an uninterrupted hour. Like I've been in phases where that kind of stuff has worked for me, but sometimes it just makes me hate myself and it doesn't actually make me more like creative or productive. Productive is such a like gross word. So yeah, the number one trick, the thing that's been working for me recently, is to keep a dream journal, because it's writing in my dream journal, the writing that I do there is like so bad and so boring that, and also like dreams don't make any sense. That I'm never tempted to, I'm never like, is this something? I'm like, this is garbage. This is like my brain taking out the garbage. But it does, in terms of like, we're talking about like muscle memory, it like makes you sit in front of your computer and type words. And that turns out to be the thing that's important about it, not like the actual content of it. It's just achievable enough. It's basically like setting a New Year's resolution of like, I will brush my teeth every day, which I've done in the past. I hope any of that works for anyone.
I wrote down dream journal. I'm very into this. 100%. Okay, Rufie, what do you think?
Oh, well, for me, it's all about being like obsessed. Like, so trying to write just for the sake of writing, for having been productive or produce pages, there's no surer way to make sure that I don't write or that what I write is bad. So for me, what I have to tend to is not my output, but what's going in, kind of. And so it's about like curating for myself exciting new things to read. I find reading fiction to sometimes be inspiring. It depends on the writer. But there's also a lot of like jealousy and craftsmanly insight stuff going on there. So a lot of times the writing that actually gets me fired up with wanting to write about something is like nonfiction, like, history of human sacrifice, or like the future of war and what kind of weapons are going to be developed, or just whatever random reading. And then you get excited and you start getting ideas, and then you get obsessed. And I feel like feeding your own obsessions is the surest way to make sure that you are then producing art that you care about.
I love that. I'm going to chime in really quickly and just say that I've like dreamed for my whole writing life, which has been my whole life, well before I was published, of writing every day. I'm like, oh, this is what healthy, like fully integrated people do. They write 1,000 words 6 days a week.
I don't do that.
No, I know. But I remember in graduate school really struggling with that because I had the 3 jobs and the classwork. And I find that I still need to get very pregnant, and I'm not just saying that because I'm pregnant. I need to get very pregnant with an idea, and then I can write for long stretches of time. And so that would kind of correspond with Rufie's advice, which is if you're really hitting your head against a wall, read, fill up with ideas, take notes, and then, write for 10 hours if you
do all the stuff that keeps you from overthinking things, like take walks, things will come to you in the shower, like go about your life, and then you'll find solutions to all those problems.
The car. Ever since I got back to California, oh my God, go for a drive.
All right, next question. This is from Cecilia. When did you start identifying as a writer and feel confident in that role?
Any day now. Ladies, do you have anything for that?
I mean, yeah, I to be perfectly honest, I thought I spent most of undergrad. I knew since I was 15 that I wanted to write novels more than anything. And when I was in college, it was more about trying to understand what job I could get that would allow me to write novels. And so I had this idea that I was going to be an academic and then somehow write novels in the summer. And like, I think Iris Murdoch helped, foster this illusion that would be possible. But it was when I was really like looking at like, am I going to apply for a PhD in something that I don't even want to be my main career? So that why don't I try just writing novels and see what happens? So then I applied to MFA programs and I didn't get in, but then I applied again the next year and I did get in. And I thought well, that was the beginning of really becoming a writer. And I then, by the time I left, I was like, I have nothing. I'm a waitress at Ruby's and none of that counts for anything. And, there's nothing I can do but just continue to claw at writing something good in the moments when I'm not just drinking myself to death. And so that's kind of what I did. And I don't think that I really had any assurance that it was going to work until I sold The Girls from Corona Del Mar. And even you think after you publish one book that you're done and now you've made it to the promised land, but then you're like, well, am I going to get to publish a second one? There's no guarantees. And you realize you're just at the start of the journey when you thought you were at the finish line.
Yeah, always. It just seems like, you kill all the biggest monster and then it just bumps you up to the next level of the video game where the monster is even bigger. I went through a similar process of being really, actually, I mean, maybe this isn't at all what you were describing, because you knew that you wanted to write novels when you were 15. I was really in denial about wanting to be a writer. And I actually knew a lot of people who did want to write novels when they were 15 and said it, and like we're really sure of it. And I was like, well, I'll figure out, that's their thing. Like I'll have to sort of figure out what my thing is. And when I came to New York, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and I was really into being a cartoonist. Which I totally go like months and years without thinking about it at all, because it's so distant from what my life is like now. And I don't even like doodle on a notepad these days, which is, I guess, sad. But at a certain point, I figured out that the people who did that as a profession were a lot better at it than I was, and that it like was just a lot easier for them than it was for me. It was like really, really, it was always really, really hard for me. And it never got any easier. Like I didn't have that thrilling sense of like mastering a skill and then getting better and better at it. It was just like, I'm okay at this and I keep being okay at it. And then I just realized that I could do just the writing part of like, I made it way too complicated for myself. Anyway, yeah. So at some point, whenever the cartoon part fell away and only like the word bubbles were left, I was like, I guess I might be a writer. Yeah.
All right. Our next question is from Jordan. This is for all three of you. Is there one thing you want your readers to know before they begin your books?
Interesting question.
Is it from Jordan Rodman?
Yes.
I'll let you guys go. That is an interesting question. She's like trying to get us to do PR.
What I would want them to know, I don't know. I love heading in. You know, one of the things that I love about, I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I have a lot of folding laundry, walking dogs, driving children places time, and not enough reading time. And so the audiobooks kind of fill that gap. And I love that I head in knowing absolutely nothing. I don't have jacket copy. I didn't like scan the first page. I can barely see the cover. It's like this big on my phone. And then you just sort of like are plunged into that other world. So I don't know that I like spend a huge amount of time thinking about what someone should know before they start reading. I guess just like if there's anything that I find myself always telling people, it's like, but they're funny. Like my books are super dark, but they're funny too. So it's not like an absolute downer. That would be my selling point to anybody's aunt or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing, because I think when I'm picking up books in a bookstore and like just reading the first page, I'm like, okay, but does this person have a sense of humor at all? Like that's all I'm ever looking for. So yeah, I mean, even if it's a Holocaust memoir, I'm like, but
how wry are they able to be about this?
That's just me.
All right, we've got a hand raised from Rebecca Johnson. Rebecca, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, thanks for taking my question, and thanks for all of the great information you three have given us so far. I'm also joining from the query trenches, so I was going to ask you, what was your querying process like? How many people or how many agents did you query, and like how did you get through it? Thank you.
What was your path like, Emily?
I had worked in book publishing, so I was like, I had worked in book publishing before I started working on my first job out of college was that I worked at a publishing house. So I knew a lot of agents already, and I was really lucky in a way, because I didn't have to like go on like awkward blind dates with agents, because I had already done that, because so much of what you do as a young editor is go out to lunch with agents, which is like really awkward and really nerve-wracking, because if you have no chemistry with someone, you still do have to sit there and like have like a hour and a half long like interaction with them. but so yeah, that's how I just knew Mel from that, and we were like kind of friends, which we still are, like friendly. So that's like the most inside baseball, not very helpful thing ever. I do like to connect people. I mean, I do a lot of like yenting, and in my in my publishing life that I still have, where I work on other people's books, I like to try to connect people with the right age and just emphasize to them that, like, if you really are feeling like you're not vibing with someone, there are lots of other people out there, and it just might not be, the right fit. Like it's like an important relationship, and you are, making money for them. So it's like they're getting something from you. So it's not like they're doing you it's important during the process, I think, to remember that, like, they're not doing you a favor, and like and you shouldn't feel like you are importuning them or like taking up too much of their time, because like they need you, and they would be lucky to represent you. You're just telling yourself that.
I'm going to jump in on that. Sorry, Rufie, just because you reminded me, I cold queried, 24 people, and I would send emails out in bunches of 5 or 7. But I queried Mel, the agent that Emily and I share, because I was a huge fan of Emily's work, and another author Mel represents, Kate Zambrano, who has a really brilliant book coming out in May called Drifts. And I do think it's important when you're querying to be specific, to look at people whose careers you admire, writers that you think like you could sit down and have a conversation with, and look at who their agents are. Because when I look back, some of these agents I was querying were just so blatantly wrong, but I just felt like I had to send out letters. And I think it's like, make it specific, as opposed to the like dumping letters into the world.
Well, and that's kind of the thing that I always feel like that's what I want to say essentially, is that I didn't understand, like I thought it was as simple as like, well, do you think it's saleable? Do you think it's like a good book? Then if it is, shouldn't you be willing to sell it? Why wouldn't you? And people would say, I'm just not in love. And I was like, well, is that what you have to be? You have to be like in love. And the thing is that you do, because that relationship is like hopefully it's a career-long kind of marriage, and it does have to be a love match. That person has to want to know what you're writing next badly enough that they will deal with all of your anxiety and like read multiple drafts of things that aren't very good. And they have to be able to go into a room and fight for you and believe that you like deserve the world, and convince other people that your book is good. And so it really has to be so much more of a love match than I understood. And I think that I wound up getting super lucky, because I decided to start with my dream agent kind of. And so I was totally obsessed with her. Like, her roster of writers was like my all-star team, and she was just way, way out of my league. And I wrote this completely insane, inappropriate, overly personal email. I think there was like a part in it where I talked about having earlier that day, like, figured out that I had baby poop smeared on my forehead, and like I didn't know how many hours it had been there, and that I was living in this world where I had no idea what I could say to her that would possibly make her want to read my book, but that I couldn't not try, kind of. And so then she read it, and just it was from the slush pile, and then she became my agent. And so I think that part of the reason that improbable thing happened is because I was obsessed with her very genuinely. And so it was a love match, at least like on my end.
Great. All right, I've got quite a few more questions. How many more do you guys want to do? 2 or 3?
That sounds good. Yeah, I saw one in the chat that I thought was really interesting, or a couple in the chat that I thought were really interesting.
Go ahead. You want to read them?
Well, someone, this the name is Ellis Family, so it's probably a shared account, asks if we struggled with, during the process of writing these books, with the notion that it wasn't the right way to apply our energy or to change the world, given the political climate and the ways in which bodies and vulnerable people are under attack. Like, is writing a politically meaningful way to engage the world when the world is on fire? I just thought that was a really interesting question. I put it to myself and my fellow panelists, but you guys first.
Rufie, please.
Well, okay. I mean, fundamentally, I think two things. As a reader and as a devotee of literature, I believe absolutely, fundamentally, yes, like literature is how we reflect on human experience and what kind of, beings we are, and we would be lost without it. It's like the rudder of the ship. And so it's essential, and people have to keep doing it, because otherwise we lose our sense of what the meaning of life is. We have to keep taking guesses, or else we'll get just totally lost. And as a writer, I think no. I mean, it is absolutely a reasonable objection to say, if you really wanted to do good works, you would do good works. You wouldn't write a novel. Writing a novel is not putting food in anybody's mouth. It's not signing anyone up to vote. It's in that sense, it is always, it's not exactly like this courageous, direct way of helping. So I kind of feel both ways about it.
I kind of agree. I mean, the difference between kind of concrete acts of service that you're talking about, or very physical, tangible ways of showing up in the world for your community and for other people, they can make writing, which writing is, just seem hopelessly narcissistic. I do believe in everything you were saying about literature, and I deeply believe in the expansion of empathy through reading. And so, as far as overall, as a shift in energy in the current climate that we live in, reaching out towards other people, I think, is a really great thing. I think it is an antidote to isolation, to this kind of detrimental individualist thinking that we can all get into. And so I do think that writing novels really, really, really matters and is its own kind of act of service. But what do you think, Emily?
I have all kinds of really deeply conflicting thoughts about this, and it's something that I think about a lot, especially in the past 3 years. It's something that I've thought about a lot. And I'm sure a lot of people who do things that aren't materially on the ground helpful have also spent a lot of time just sort of wondering whether there's any point to what we're doing. While we were talking about it, though, I kept thinking about how much easier it is to believe that books matter when I'm thinking about the books that I haven't written, but that I've been involved with, putting them into the world somehow. I really, really believe that the books that we published via the Coffee House Emily Books in print, those books needed to exist. And I've seen I've seen what those books have done, as they've made their way into the world. And I feel like they have, even if it's something that we don't totally understand everything that they've made, that they've caused yet, there's something more than intangible that some of those books have enacted by coming into people's consciousness. And this sounds very woo-woo, and I don't mean it that way at all. I mean it very concretely and materially, that like, I don't know, like just for example, like that publishing Miriam Gerbo's memoir was like, in some sense, like a world changing act, like the people who read that book like had their minds changed in a way that will like change their actions and their perceptions for the rest of their lives. I think I really believe that, and it's much easier to feel that way about books that are not your own book.
Yours.
But just the fact that that's like a thing that books can do, I think it's something that's more radical than like creating empathy, which is like, you know, that's great. But sometimes when you create empathy, it stops there, you know, and people sometimes feel like, oh, well, I understand. I know about this. And so like, I don't have to do anything else. But I do feel like literature has like a radical potential. It also doesn't have to. It also can just be something that people like, you know, share, and it's like a way of transmitting one person's consciousness to another. Just having a break from the like voice in your own head is something that can be really like good for people. Like it's good that exists. It doesn't need to have any like it doesn't necessarily need to have any like redeeming value beyond that. Like I would fight for its right to exist just as that, without any other sort of like holy, you know, moral like aspect. I don't know. So, but those are so I said two totally different things, but for me they like coexist peacefully in my mind because I'm a Libra.
All right. How about one more question from the chat? Let's see. Oh, we got a lot of directions here. Do you guys want to do more publishing business or something a little bit more fun?
Anything.
All right. This one's from Leah. I'm a writer too, in my early 30s. Thinking a lot about motherhood and how it would influence my writing life. What's your experience and how do you still find the space and place to write?
Well, I mean, this is something that we have all three of us, direct experience with. I wrote The Girls from Corona Del Mar mainly while I was pregnant with my first, and then sort of rewrote it and finished it when he was a baby. Luckily, he was a very good sleeper. Because we could not afford, you know, childcare of any kind. So there are periods where your child is little, especially from like 12 months to 2.5, where they will not leave you alone. And so if you have childcare, you can carve out time to write. If you don't, then you will be slowed down by it because you will not have even the headspace to generate ideas. That being said, I feel like motherhood has made me such a better person, such a more patient person, a more curious person. And so I feel like my work has been vastly improved by having had the life experience of, you know, raising kids. And then the other thing that I think is not as apparent is that they get older and then they go to school and it's a whole different ball game. And I feel like Emily is still like in the thick of being
sometimes they go to school.
Mother. Yeah.
If there's school. Yeah. Ideally they go to school.
I mean, there's this really narrow window because then they start not wanting to even hang out with you like really fast. So they're like, yeah, bye. I want to like go hang out with my friends. I want to go play Minecraft or whatever it is. And so then you're like fighting. So they're like, well, what about family game night? Like, let's play Monopoly. So I think that I could not have conceived of how quickly I would regain my liberty. To me, it felt like I had lost it forever and that I was like doomed always to have other beings literally like sucking the energy out of my body.
It's very reassuring. And thank you.
I just don't believe people when they're like, it goes by so quickly. My son is 16 months. No, I know it doesn't. And in a way, but I'm like, this is the longest 16 months of my life. I've lived like
for sure.
4 decades, and it will never end because I'm having another one, especially it just is starting that clock over again. But I do know that school, what happens?
It just is so much easier all of a sudden. I think 3 is way hard. Everyone says terrible 2s and 2s are hard. I think 3 is way harder. And then 4, you're like, well, we're having a delightful conversation about robots while we're in a restaurant. No one's throwing anything or anything, you know? And that's not your experience.
I just have a particularly spicy child. I'm sure the second one actually is going to be like this. The second one, who is almost 2, and the older one is almost 5. The second one will like pick up the toy that his brother has like flung across the room in rage, and he'll like gently put it back where it belongs. So like he is just lawful good and like came out of the womb that way, and it has nothing to do with anything.
I know. Isn't that so weird how they just come out, how they come out?
It's bananas. I was going to say, like, my one rah, yay motherhood thing vis-a-vis like being a writer, all questions of like how much of your soul and time it sucks, like just shoving them to the side and pretending they don't exist for just one tiny moment. Is that just like hormonally and psychologically, maybe even physically, physiologically, the changes that you go through in terms of like pregnancy and childbirth, and then like, you know, early postpartum, and like when the child is older, it's really good for fiction because you get to experience what it's like to be a whole lot of different people. And it sounds like a joke, but I think I feel that. Like I feel like when I think of like just what my headspace was like, you know, like a year and a half ago, I'm like, yeah, don't relate to her at all. Kind of a stranger to me. That's useful, actually. Like that's a useful experience for me. Method acting, kind of.
All right. Well, I have one last question for you all, and it's a simple one. What's been giving you strength through this quarantine times?
My kid that I was just complaining about. my like terrible 16-month-old tyrant that doesn't, you know, allow me to be the person that I aspire to be all the time in my writing life is 100% giving me life right now. You know how parents feel about their kids. I don't need to go into that, but I can't really think of anything else. Some good books, Perfect Tunes, and The Knockout Queen. Actually, that's my answer.
I was gonna say woodworking videos on YouTube. I've gotten really into that. I think from a fundamental place, there's something about your priorities that just change once you have kids, where as long as they're okay, like they're physically alive and okay, then you're like, well, okay, we're all right then. Like as long as that's okay, we'll keep going with this. And I think it just must be really hard to be left alone in your adult headspace all the time with continuous access to the news, you know, because then they go to bed and then I get access to the news. And I freak myself out so badly that I won't be able to sleep. And that's where the woodworking videos come in. That's when you need them, because it's very soothing to watch. So you're like, I didn't know that's how you made a cabinet. I feel so like inspired by how easy it is to make a cabinet. Plus they have cool tools.
I will have to check those out.
I'll be the best ones.
I really, even in normal or normal-ish times, for as long as it's existed, Who Weekly has been my favorite podcast. And like now more than ever, somehow, Who Weekly is still my favorite podcast. I think because this is so deeply sad, maybe, but it like, for me, it scratches the itch of like, socializing with adults who aren't my imaginary podcast friends, like that I get to hang out with. I'm, and it's it's like a maybe slightly unhealthy relationship where the other day, one of the hosts said that he had never watched The Sopranos, and I had to stop myself from like immediately like calling the hotline of this podcast to be like, okay, so here's how you should watch The Sopranos, and just like giving like specific detailed advice about like what, anyway. So and how bonkers is it that he hasn't watched The Sopranos? It's like, how bad do things have to get before you watch The Sopranos? Like, you were waiting for a rainy day? Like, it's raining. Watch The Sopranos. Like, take it out of the vault. I might watch The Sopranos again. Like, I've already been through the whole thing twice in two different relationships. So you have to watch it with someone that you're in a relationship with so that you can talk about it. It's like the only actual real advice that I have. Yeah, that's all I got.
Excellent answers all. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I wish that I could ask the audience to applaud, but I can't. So maybe everyone can just say thank you or drop a clapping emoji in the chat and we'll pretend that we're having an applause.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
so much.
Adi, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.
I see